So if we drill into the initial contact, you might hear me talk about initial contact and you might think, oh yeah, that's a cold call. Sure, it could be a cold call. It could also be a cold email. Again, remember, this is the first time we're interacting with a little bit of back and forth with someone. It could also be meeting someone at a networking event. It could also be an inbound call. Maybe someone was referred to you, or they came across your website and they called you and called your main number, got referred to you, routed to you through a switchboard. It could be an inbound email. Maybe someone sends an email to your company, or someone sends an email to a web inquiry submission form on your website. It could also be a customer interacting with you or your company through a website chat window. It could also be interacting with a prospect over social media. So the point here is you don't need to memorize that. The main thing I want you to kind of digest is that this is the first time you're interacting with someone, and it could be interacting with them in any different way given the different methods or technologies we have today. So in this first interaction, you have a few goals, and it's important to know what these goals are so you don't try to accomplish too much. For example, your goal of the initial contact is not to sell the product, and so you should sort of remove that from your mind, and that could be something new for you to kind of realize or think about if you're in product selling mode where you're always trying to sell the product or validate a need for what you sell. At this point, you're really only trying to pre-qualify the prospect, which is just to determine, does it even make sense for us to have a conversation? You're not trying to determine, are they the decision maker? Do they have money? It doesn't matter. You're just trying to determine, are they in the general area for needing what you have? And by the way, there's a full module on qualifying the prospect and how to qualify, and we'll talk about that in great detail. But at this point, you're only trying to pre-qualify, so that's just a few soft questions. Then you always want to build interest in what you sell, but you only need to build a little bit of interest, so a little bit of curiosity in what you sell. So you don't need to build interest so that it's at a point where they want to buy what you sell, just enough interest to keep them, basically enough interest so that they agree to move to the next step of your sales process. And the close that in the initial contact is not to close the prospect on validating that they want to buy or need what you sell. The close is closing them on talking in more detail. So that's basically agreeing to have a conversation or scheduling a meeting, setting an appointment. Now the structure for the initial contact is, this is a very short conversation. So it's 2 to 5 minutes. Now, and one of the core concepts of the Smart Sales System was focus more on the prospect and focus more on their interests. So to cater that, we want to focus 80% of the initial contact on the prospect and 20% on you. By the way, this might be something new for the product selling salesperson, which would typically try to spend 80% of the initial contact on them. This is what I sell, this is what I do. By the way, an initial contact cold email that for a product selling salesperson is going to be 80% all about the company and the product. So you want to shift, make it 80% about them, 20% about you. And the best salesperson is the one that asks the best questions. The questions to ask in the initial contact are your pain questions and your current environment questions. So we're going to provide you with a lot of different questions. These are the only questions you need to worry about in this brief 2 to 5 minute meeting. Now, and by the way, I just want to point out, I know 2 to 5 minutes sounds like a short time, and you might think, well, there's a lot of cold calls or networking event or times where I talk to a prospect, maybe even in a chat window where you're interacting longer. And so what happens there is either you're taking too much time in the initial contact, or you're moving to the meeting step at the same time as the initial contact. So we actually refer to that as an instant meeting, and we'll talk about what that is later. You need to be aware when an instant meeting is happening. What I really want you to be aware of is where you're at in the sales process when you're talking to a prospect, so you can know the different questions to ask and what different things to accomplish, and you can control the sales process and control the prospect and the interaction to a greater degree.